And even stronger, because in a country like ours, seniors shouldn't struggle to make ends meet. We renegotiated NAFTA, securing trade access to our largest and most important trading partner at a time of U.S. protectionism and unpredictability. And we're conserving more of our nature and ensuring that our air stays clean and our water safe, because we owe it to our kids, to ourselves, and to our future to take care of our environment. These things are making a real difference in people's lives. And this fall, Canadians once again get to vote for the kind of Canada they want to live in. Cet automne,
this fall, we all have an important decision to make: to continue to move forward by relying on the previous progress, or to go back to the Harper Days policies. Conservatives like to claim that they are there for everyday Canadians, but once they get to office, they benefit the richest and they cut services that middle-class Canadians depend on. But Canadians know that it's not by making cuts that we're going to make our society richer. That's why we decided to move forward the country by investing in families, in workers, and our communities. In 4 years alone, we negotiated new agreements on health with the provinces and territories, and we made historic investments in home care and mental health services. We eliminated 87 boil water advisories, and we are about to lift all of those that are still in place. We introduced the new Canada Child Benefit, which helps parents by giving them hundreds of dollars every month, tax-free. And we lifted 900,000 Canadians out of poverty, including 300,000 children. And today, Canada is one of the most successful economies in the G7. In fact, we're talking about more than 1 million new jobs created since the beginning of our mandate.
Canadians created over 1 million new jobs in 4 short years. And much of the credit is owed to small business owners who employ so many people in their communities and grow their local and our national economy.
Our small business owners continue to be a very powerful engine of growth for our communities. We believe that 7 Canadians out of 10 work for an SME, which means that these owners are among the biggest employers in Canada. However, people continue to face important obstacles when they're looking to start a business or extend their business or get their products and services beyond our borders. To help them, we lowered business taxes from 11% to 9%.
Entrepreneurs, because while the number of women-owned businesses has increased in recent years, only 16% of Canadian businesses are owned or led by women. Our goal is to double that number by 2025, and to do so, we launched the first Women Entrepreneurship Strategy.
We also gave more support to women entrepreneurs, because despite the progress that is made, only 16% of SMEs belong to or are led by women. We pledged to double that number between now and 2025, and in order to do that, we launched the first Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. But one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs remains access to financing. People have lots of great ideas that should be explored, but they need help to get their initial financing that will allow them to attract further investments from the private sector. That's why, under a new Liberal government, we will provide a grant of $50,000 to 2,000 entrepreneurs every year to help them to launch their business. The selection selection criteria for the program will be determined by the BDC in cooperation with people from the community, people who are involved in financial entrepreneurship. Now, in the first year of a business, owners have to make a number of strategic decisions that will have a decisive impact on their growth and sometimes on their very survival. Unfortunately, they cannot always get experts around them to help them make the best decisions or to move into new markets. Canada is the only G7 country to have a free trade agreement with all the other members of the G7, but again, our SMEs have to have access to the necessary resources in order to seize the opportunities that are out there. Our party believes that the government has an important role to play in that area. That's why we will eliminate the service charges by the BDC and Export Development Canada for these businesses. Furthermore, to allow them to save more money, a new Liberal government will reduce the incorporation fees by 75%.
We're also going to eliminate the swipe fee on HST and GST that merchants must pay to credit card companies every time a credit card is swiped. By giving more support to SMEs, we're helping business owners reach new heights while making sure they continue to create good jobs for Canadians and grow our economy. Mes chers amis, un nouveau gouvernement libéral
will continue to invest where it makes a difference. The measures announced today will allow a new Quebec entrepreneur launching a business to save $1,448. We will continue to be there for people when they want to get involved in new projects or when they want to go further and scale new heights. Because politics should be about serving people, serving you. We've accomplished a great many things in the last 4 years, but that is only the start. This fall, Canadians have an important choice to make. Are we going to go back to the inefficient policies of the past, or will we continue to move forward? That is the choice for us, for each one of us. I choose to move forward for our PMEs, for people in the middle class, for all Canadians. Thank you. Yes, good morning, Mr. Trudeau. You're in Quebec today. I want to give you an opportunity to say to Quebecers exactly your thoughts on Bill 21. When it goes to the Supreme Court, will you challenge it? Is that what is going to happen? Well, as I've said, and as Canadians know and Quebecers know, I will always be there to defend fundamental rights and freedoms. I do not think a federal government should legislate on what people are wearing. And I think a free society should not allow a discrimination. Quebecers themselves are currently challenging that legislation, and that's how our chart of rights and freedoms is supposed to work. In other words, Canadians should be able to challenge laws they don't agree with, particularly when they affect fundamental rights and freedoms. And obviously, I'm following this process very carefully. But for the time being, I consider that it would be counterproductive for a federal government to intervene or to be part of that challenge for the time being.
I have always been very clear that I disagree with Law 21. I don't think in a free society we should be legitimizing or permitting discrimination against anyone. I will always stand up for individual rights and freedoms. In this case, Quebecers themselves are contesting this law before the courts. They're in fact defending and using the Charter the way it's meant to be used. It's there to protect citizens from laws that they feel are unfair and limit their rights and freedoms. We are, of course, watching that very closely, following along attentively. But at this point, we feel it would be counterproductive for the federal government to weigh in.
Are you concerned that it might affect your popularity in Quebec? Now, the current Quebec government is popular, as is the bill. And here in Trois-Rivières, this bill is very popular. Well, I think all Quebecers and all Canadians know that I'm someone who will always defend rights and freedoms. I will always defend fundamental rights. This is something that all Quebecers and Canadians know about me. There will be no surprise in my saying that I'm here to defend everyone's rights.
I don't think Quebecers or any Canadians would be surprised to know that I am standing up unequivocally to defend individual rights and freedoms. That's something that Quebecers know very well of me, like all Canadians do.
Good morning, Tonda McCharles of the Toronto Star. Exactly what impact do you fear in Quebec or elsewhere of any federal intervention on your part?
This is a discussion going on amongst Quebecers right now and their provincial government. And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms exists so that citizens can challenge laws that they disagree with, that they feel are an unnecessary limitation on their fundamental rights and freedoms. That's why we have a charter, and it's being used right now by citizens in Quebec to contest before the courts this law that they feel is unfair in limiting their own rights and freedoms. That's how our system is supposed to work. As I've said, as a federal government, we're watching very carefully this process that is going on as the charter lays out it should, and we are weighing whether to intervene. At this point, we do not think that it would be productive. Indeed, we think it would be counterproductive for the federal government to engage.
So if you have not ruled that out, why wouldn't or shouldn't the federal arguments be made in and tested by Quebec lower courts? And shouldn't Quebec voters know your intention before Election Day?
I think Quebec voters know full well that I will always defend individual rights and freedoms, and indeed that I disagree with Bill 21. I don't think in a free society we should be limiting or allowing limiting fundamental rights or allowing discrimination to happen. This is something that is core to my values and is something that Quebecers and all Canadians know I will always stand up for. The process is working the way it should. We have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms so that citizens can challenge laws brought in by different orders of government in court to protect their fundamental rights and freedoms. That's the way the Charter was made, and that's the way it's being used right now. We are going to follow carefully and make a determination. We've made a determination right now that this is not a stage in which we should intervene. But I will highlight that we're not going to close the door on intervening at a later date, because I think it would be irresponsible for a federal government to close the door to intervention ever on a matter that does touch fundamental freedoms. We
are not closing the door to a possible intervention because it would be irresponsible for a federal government to choose to shut the door forever with respect to a matter involving fundamental rights. Canadian press. Quebec is one of the provinces where there is a lot of support for fighting climate change. But why should Quebecers take you seriously with your photo ops here and there when a few hours ago you were talking to the oil industry in the West? Well, I think Quebecers and all Canadians know that you can't make a choice between the environment and the economy. You absolutely have to have them go hand in hand. And the choice in this election is between a government that has shown real leadership over 4 years by being a government that has done the most to protect the environment in the history of this country, and the choice of a government that does not believe there's a need to challenge or do something about climate change. So the fact is you can have a plan for economic progress, but you need an environmental plan as well. And over the last 4 years, we have put a price on pollution that's applied across the country, despite conservative politicians that would like to stop us from doing that. We've invested $1 billion in an ocean protection plan. We're in the process of eliminating single-use plastics. We are also eliminating coal, and we're also protecting our marine areas at a record level for Canada. So we are protecting the environment at the same time as we are financing the transition to a greener economy, and that's why we need this oil pipeline to new markets, because otherwise there will be more oil traveling by train or by truck, and we all know that that's a lot more dangerous than pipelines. Are you not being not entirely truthful here? No, I've been saying the exact same thing everywhere. I believe we have to get our resources, our oil resources, to new markets other than the United States, because our resources are undervalued, and we have to fund that transition and do it responsibly. And we have to continue to develop our economy while still protecting our environment. And that's exactly what we're doing as a government. We understand that there's still a great deal to be done, but the choice now is between a government and conservative politicians that want to go backwards and do nothing to protect the environment, versus a government that has already shown more leadership than ever before in the history of Canada when it comes to environmental protection and fighting climate change. TVA Nouvelle, we're seeing the numbers in this campaign, and I think Trois-Rivières and La Mauricie are very important for you in this campaign. Well, I'm very happy to be back in Trois-Rivières. I was here a few weeks ago to support Valerie, and throughout this campaign, we know that across Canada, people will be facing an important choice, and that's why I'm spending so much time crisscrossing this vast country to meet as many people as possible. I'm very pleased to be here in Trois-Rivières today, and very pleased as well to be in Saint-Tite tomorrow. These are opportunities for me to meet people and tell them about the important choice facing them. Are we going to continue the good work that's been done, lifting people out of poverty, creating jobs, creating economic growth, and so on? Here in Trois-Rivières, we know what the major issues are. We want to bring in a high-frequency train between Montreal and Quebec City that will go next to the St. Lawrence. But you need a government that's willing to invest to make that happen, a government that's willing to invest in transportation. The Conservatives only want austerity and cuts. And for 4 years, we have shown that investing in our communities, like Trois-Rivières, is good for the economy, good for the citizens, and that's the responsible thing to do. And we will continue to do that, and I'm very pleased to be back here. You talk about the major issues and infrastructure, but there's one issue that hasn't been resolved. It's the Trois-Rivières Airport. What is happening with that? Well, as you know full well, the federal government did get involved to provide compensation on pyrrhotite. We are continuing to work with those people who have been victims of that, and we're talking about several $1 million to help those families that are still suffering the impact of pyrrhotite. And I want to point out again that the Conservative government did nothing on that issue for many years, and in fact opposed what we are doing to help the victims. And this is something that you should ask the Conservative candidates about, that they are talking out of both sides of their mouth, running for a government that didn't help people on this. Now, with respect to the airport, we're continuing to work on this, but we've shown that we're there to invest in economic development in the regions. And we know just how important the airport here in Trois-Rivières is, and under the leadership of Transport Canada, we're continuing to move forward on that.
Mr. Trudeau, Joyce Napier, CTV. Yesterday, Mr. Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leader at the debate, said about energy projects, and I'm quoting, "We cannot create a system in this country where one group of individuals, one Indigenous community, can hold hostage large projects that employ so many Indigenous Canadians." So I'm wondering, how do you react to that?
I think, first of all, I deplore the perspective and the language that he used. I think it's really important to understand that Indigenous Canadians are part of the fundamental fabric of our society, the original occupants and stewards of this land for millennia, and deserve to be full partners and fully respected as partners as we move forward. We recognize, and we always have, that Indigenous Canadians have a range of perspectives from one community to the next on various projects, and what's really important is that we engage in meaningful conversations about how we're going to build a better future that includes them, not just for having been consulted, but develops partnerships with them as we move forward. That's why we're moving forward on proposals to allow Indigenous communities and Indigenous investors to purchase the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. But that's why, at the same time, we're listening very carefully to the Indigenous communities who have concerns and even opposition towards projects like that, to better understand their concerns and find ways to minimize the impacts of the negative concerns that they have. We will always engage in a way that is respectful and positive in how we move forward in partnership with Indigenous peoples.
Theo Argytis, Bloomberg News. Both the Liberals and the NDP seem to have or share a willingness to tax the richest Canadians. You've raised the marginal income tax rate for high-income earners above $200,000. The NDP seem to have a much more ambitious plan. They want to go after the super wealthy, the richest of the rich in Canada, and they proposed a wealth tax. Can you tell us whether you think there are any merits to the idea of a wealth tax in Canada?
The very first thing we did when we took office in 2015 was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them on the middle class. And that actually worked. It put more money in the pockets of families that actually needed it and who used it to support their kids, to support their opportunities. And the confidence that we've seen in Canadians, in their economic outlooks, is part of what has led Canadians to create over 1 million jobs over the past 4 years. We have some of the lowest unemployment, but we have it at a time where we have also managed to lift 900,000 Canadians out of poverty. So our focus on growing the economy is focused on the middle class and people working hard to join it. We know that the Conservatives' approach at trickle-down simply doesn't work. Their tax breaks for the wealthy and cutting of services for everyone else don't work. We will have much more to say in the coming weeks about how we're going to move forward to continue to support the middle class in real and tangible ways, because that's the issue that Canadians have in mind. How are we going to make them more confident about their future and help them get by today? That's the focus that we've had for 4 years, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
The idea of a wealth tax, what do you think of the idea of a wealth tax?
We move forward with a tax that raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lowered them for the middle class. It was the first thing we did, a measure, by the way, that the NDP not only campaigned against, but voted against in this last Parliament. So I look forward to continue to talk about what we have tangibly, concretely done and what we're going to continue to do, to continue to give opportunities for Canadians to thrive and businesses to grow.
Michelle Zilio, The Globe and Mail. You keep saying the clerk of the Privy Council made the decision not to waive cabinet confidentiality in the SNC-Lavalin case. But government and legal experts, including former Judge John Montgomery, says that your decision and your decision alone is your decision and your decision alone to make. Why are you misleading Canadians? And are you afraid to waive cabinet confidentiality because the police may find obstruction of justice?
We granted unprecedented access to investigators, to committees, to look into this matter fully. This was a decision that was not taken lightly, but it was important to grant that unprecedented access so that the truth could be known in this issue. But as I've said many times, I'm happy to reassure Canadians that my job has always been to stand up for their jobs, and that I will always do that. Sorry, you can come to the mic, Christine.
Hi, Mercedes Stevenson, Global News. As you know, we've been covering money laundering quite a bit. It's a major issue in the BC Lower Mainland, where you were just yesterday. Your MP for Richmond, Joe Pescasolido, has been associated with a number of allegedly suspicious transactions at his former law firm, including, quote, illegal international money laundering in an immigration investment scheme. Can Canadians trust you to deal with money laundering and the related law trust account loopholes?
We are working very closely with the provincial government in BC and other partners across the country on the issue of money laundering, which has an impact obviously not just in financial sectors, but also in the housing sector, on luxury vehicles, and on some very negative impacts across the Lower Mainland specifically, but indeed right across the country. So our Minister Bill Blair has been a strong partner to the province of BC on this, and we're going to continue to move forward on significant measures, which include the announcement we made yesterday that will create a registry of business owners of real estate transactions that will ensure that organized crime money and money laundering has a much more difficult time finding avenues to be used in Canada. We recognize there's always more to do, but the announcement we made yesterday is another step forward in the many facets of our approach on fighting money laundering and organized crime in Canada. In regards to the MP in question, he has addressed these issues, and further questions can be asked of him.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde, c'est terminé. Merci.
Merci tout le monde. Merci. Merci.
What did you make of Justin Trudeau's announcement in Trois-Rivières, Quebec?
Yeah, so why don't I start with how much the Liberals say it costs, although we can't fact-check that against the Parliamentary Budget Officer. $129 million their promises are worth in 2020-21. There's a couple different things here that I think will be news to people who are in the world of entrepreneurs and small businesses. They want to end the swipe fee. So if you're a small business and you're allowing your customers to use credit cards, there is a charge for you for stuff that you have to apply GST and HST to. Federation of Canadian Federation of Independent Business estimates that will save people $500 million alone if that swipe fee goes away. That's not small change, I think, for small businesses. We're also going to cut the costs that you have to pay when you incorporate a business federally. Right now it costs about $200. They're going to lower that to $50. I think that would also be welcomed by a lot of entrepreneurs. They're going to cut some other fees that are charged by government agencies, and there's something really interesting. Trudeau didn't really get into it. But they're proposing a pilot project, something called a Canada Entrepreneur Account, that initially will provide up to 2,000 entrepreneurs a year with as much as $50,000 to help them launch a new business. Proposing this would be a pilot project for 3 years, and then they'd see whether it could be taken bigger on that. You see the efforts here to kind of seed, reward innovation, try and get small businesses going. That's always a big issue when you get outside of major, large urban centers into these smaller communities, and they want to figure out where their future economic growth is going to come from. Interesting idea to see if that works. Also talking about vouchers too, to help people get internet services off the ground on the government's dime. So a lot of stuff here that I think particularly people in that sector will want to learn a little bit more about.